Hi everyone. Thank you for joining me for this month's Stampin' Class by Mail. I'm Gina Wieselman of MySweetPaper.com, and I can't wait to show you how to stamp and assemble the card designs featuring the Traditions of Christmas Suite by Stampin' Up. If you ordered a Class by Mail kit, go ahead and pull out all your supplies now. If you didn't order a Class by Mail kit, visit my website linked in the video description to access the full supply list and cut your own supplies. You'll also need the stamp set, ink pads, and other supply items shown here. If you need any supplies, make sure to designate me as your demonstrator to qualify for all of my promotions, including receiving 3 completed cards from my collection with every order of $50 or more. Click subscribe on this YouTube channel so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos, and reach out anytime you have questions or would like to chat more about Stampin' Up. Our first card design is the Elegant Seasons Greetings design. If you ordered a Class by Mail kit, go ahead and pull out all of these parts and pieces now. If you didn't order a Class by Mail kit, pause the video here, prep everything you need, and come back when you're ready to stamp and assemble. Let's get started with our stamping. We'll be using the Cherry Cobbler ink pad, and this great die cut here lines up perfectly with the Season's Greetings stamp. So that's awesome. I do want to note that it is directional. So if you are trying to line it up and you notice that it's not quite how you think it should line up, flip this over because it's not symmetrical. So you should see nice kind of parallel lines running with each other. So now that I know I have it oriented the right way, I'm going to ink up, and that ink is looking very juicy on there. So I'm going to grab a scrap paper to stamp some of this off. Okay, so I have some scrap paper here. If you notice, there's just like some bubbles showing up there. And so I want to make sure I get a nice even stamp. So I'm going to ink it up a little lighter, do a test. All right, I did recently re-ink this ink pad. I think maybe I went a little overboard, but that works. Okay. That is actually all of our stamping, unless you'd like to add something to the inside. So I'm going to go ahead and close up my ink pad. Now with our stamping complete, we'll go ahead and start assembly. So I'm going to pull out my Cherry Cobbler card base, and I'll start by layering on it this embossed piece. This was embossed using the traditional wreath 3D embossing folder. It's really great. It's a large image. You know, it gives you a full wreath if you choose. But the way that I have this oriented here will be covering up this middle part, and so it'll just add some nice foliage in the background. But we'll use our regular Stampin' Seal for this. I am typically pretty generous with the adhesive when it's an embossed piece like this, just because with those different layers and dimensions, I like to make sure everything is going to stick. But there's no real up or down to this. I want to note, I don't think I would have thought to mix Real Red and Cherry Cobbler, the two reds, but it does that in the designer series paper, and I liked how that looked, so I decided to go for it. Speaking of designer series paper, we will take this beautiful floral pattern and back it on our gold foil sheet. Just center that up. And then we'll be putting this on the card front. Now there's no real directionality that I can see. So what I'm going to do is just be choosing, knowing that the greeting is going to be toward the bottom, if there's a focal point that I want to have higher up at the top. And another helpful thing for me is knowing that the embellishments can go anywhere, but they also look really great in the centers of the flowers. So I want to make sure I have at least one floral piece ready for that. Okay, it's not really directional, but for some reason this flower just looks better this way. So I'm going to put it up that way. And I used Stampin' Dimensionals for this. So I'll go ahead and grab some of those. think 5 should do the trick here. So peel that release paper. What way did I say? I think this way. Okay. Looks good. And then I'm also going to use dimensionals for this piece. You could use the minis, but I actually kind of liked using the full size because this is split apart here, and I want to just kind of seal that back together since I am using the whole piece. I'm just putting them across the center. I'm not getting way out to the edge because those are going to hang off. So I don't want any issues with crossing multiple levels of the card there. Okay. And then this, you can play around with kind of where you think it looks best. Okay. Let's go ahead and get our panel on the inside. You have a basic white piece and then just a strip of designer series paper. It does have the gold foil on one side, so you could use that. I'm going to stick with our Real Red Cherry Cobbler color scheme, even though it is a little painful to cover up this beautiful design. And I'm just going to run this along the edge, making sure it's straight. And for pieces like this where I'm wanting it to line up exactly, I will often give you some excess length. So you can just grab your paper snips and trim any excess. Okay, regular Stampin' Seal for getting this inside. Just center, apply some nice pressure. And then our last touch is 3 of our traditional sparkling sequins. Now I would show you the whole pack, but we've used all of them for this kit, except the green color. So with your kit, you'll get the gold, the red, and the kind of pool party light blue. We didn't use this green, so I just want to show that quickly because this is one of my favorite embellishment packs I've seen for a while. So you got 3 different sizes for each card. You can go ahead and choose where you want to put them. I might put the large one at the center of that flower. And then I don't really have other great floral focal points, so I'm just going to drop these other 2 just to kind of sprinkle them around. And this is our first design. Our second design is our traditional Christmas card. Go ahead and pull out these parts and pieces. Once again, we'll stamp first, this time on this pool party die cut piece using our Secret C ink pad. And we're going to be stamping the words Merry Christmas. Now these are 2 different stamps. If you wanted to mount them to one block, you could, but I found that for me, it was easier to actually start with Merry and center that and just set it down a little bit from the top. And then I came back with Christmas. And there is some flexibility here, so you don't have to be too concerned about exact placement. Oh, I love brand new ink pads and how beautifully they stamp. Okay, very simple stamping again. We're really letting the designer series paper and embellishments speak here. If you want to stamp on the inside or the envelope, go ahead and do that now. Assembly-wise, we will start by building this panel for the front of the card. And so you have a Secret C piece of cardstock and then 3 pieces of designer series paper that are going to be lined up across the middle. And what I like to do with this is start with the 2 that are on the ends. I'll actually just get adhesive on both of those right away. One quick note, there is a longer, skinnier piece. This is for the inside of the card, so don't chop this up. Use the short pieces for the card front. But then in terms of positioning, I am going to place this so that I have about equal borders on the 3 sides. And then I'll go ahead and do the same for this one. And it is a very narrow border, so just make note of that. And then for this middle piece, I will get my regular Stampin' Seal on here, and then I'm just going to center that between the two. And so it should be about equal borders around all of the sides, but if it's off a tiny bit, no one will ever notice. Again, you can figure out directionality wise if an orientation looks better than the other. This flower to me looks like the stem is coming down, so I want to make sure that is up. And I'll get out my thick basic white card base and fold that along the score line. Okay, and then I will add this panel. Okay, so I'm making sure this is centered left to right and top to bottom. Looks good, looks about straight, perfect. And then I'm going to take out my ribbon. This is the Real Red shiny 1/2 inch ribbon, and I just love it. And we're going to start by actually securing this to the back of this greeting panel. So what I did is just folded it in half, and then I want to set so that there's about that much, maybe it's at like 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch showing on that side. As I'm lining up, I do want to make sure that these two strands are going to come off about in the center. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I want to make sure I'm not angled too much, unless that's the look you're going for, in which case, great. But I'm actually going to just use a piece of Scotch tape as my first adhesive here. So I'll get this positioned, carefully flip it over, and then run that across. And now with that secured where I want it, I'm going to come back with some dimensionals, and I always like to overlap them between the edge of the ribbon and the paper as much as possible, just as kind of an extra security measure for holding everything in place. So I probably don't actually need 5 dimensionals here for pop-up purposes, but because this is also acting to secure the ribbon, I'm going to be liberal with them. Okay. And then this is going to be centered, and it's a little bit easier to center this because the edge of this is going to roughly line up with that square of designer series paper. And then I want to trim each side. So I'm going to come in with my paper snips and trim at an angle on each side. Okay. Last but not least, you can probably guess our finishing touch here. These sequins, I just can't get enough of them. And I really like how they contrast the red with the Secret Sea color. So I positioned them right on that designer series paper. Of course, you can position them however you see fit. And I completely forgot to record it, but you will want to go ahead and take that long skinny strip of designer series paper and use that for decoration on the inside of your card. There is our second card design. Our third design is our Floral season card. Go ahead and pull out these parts and pieces. Once again, we're going to start with our stamping, again using the Cherry Cobbler ink pad. And stamping again is really simple for this card. It's just going to be this banner piece, which was punched using the banner's Pick-a-Punch. And so I'll just ink up my 'Tis the Season stamp and center this right on there. There we go. And that's it for stamping, unless you'd like to stamp something inside the card or on the envelope. All right, let's get ready to assemble. So I'll pull out my thick basic white card base, fold that along the score line to get a nice crisp fold. And then We'll again be using that same 3D embossing folder on the pool party layer, so we'll get that added. So just center that. And then for the inside of the card, once again, I have a piece of designer series paper for you to use. So you can just run that along the side. And again, it's actually that same paper as the first card. So if you wanted to, you could certainly do this. I think maybe this time I will. This piece is a little bit longer than the one I shared for our last card because it's not mounted on a white panel. It just stretches all the way across the card. So go ahead and line that up, trim the excess, and that is it for the inside. Now for the outside, we're going to be building up these two pieces. And something that's really interesting about these dies is that it actually cuts this partially off. So you'll want to be really gentle with the cherry cobbler piece because we want to keep that thin border on. On the basic white piece, we're actually going to go in with our paper snips. Get rid of that little scrap. And I'm just going to be cutting this off. So right at the corners, I'm just going to be coming in because I want that outer layer removed, just the one. There is this other part that's kind of a partial layer that will stay. So it's just trimming this off. Okay. Then once that is trimmed, we will adhere this right onto the cherry cobbler. And so again, this is kind of a delicate operation because we want to make sure that the cherry cobbler border is showing around the outside. But that looks good. Okay. And then we are going to glue this right on. And I just used regular Stampin' Seal for this. So we'll center this on the card. Okay. Next up, we will get out this floral spray. There are two different patterns that you will have gotten in your kit, one with the red flowers, the other with the pool party and white. So you'll receive some combination of both of those. But once again, I'm just using regular Stampin' Seal. I'm not going all the way to the ends because those will be hanging off a little bit. But in terms of placement, I'm aiming for centered, so I don't want, especially with the bow, and that bow is going to be a little bit above this part where it juts out. Of course, you can play around with placement and arrange it however you like. And then we're going to pop up the 'Tis the Season panel. Your regular Stampin' Dimensionals would probably fit here. I'm going to just use the mini ones to make sure. And since everything is kind of one layer with just minimal pop-up already, I'm spreading these across the whole banner, so you don't have to be as careful with where you're placing them. Okay. Placement-wise for this, definitely don't want to cover up the bow, so anywhere between bow and flowers based on what you think looks best, and aiming for approximately centered and hopefully straight. I like using this grid paper so that I can kind of mentally straighten things out a little bit easier. And our final touch is 3 more of those traditional sparkling sequins. Again, 1 in each size. For this card, I put the large one on the bottom left and the 2 others on the top right. And so showing both of the patterns with both of the different color schemes, there is our 3rd and final card design. Follow the link in the video description to access this class by mail posting on my website. It includes a full supply list and a link to a specially curated Pinterest board with more ideas for how to use your supplies. You can also find more information about the next class by mail on my website. If you're not already on my email list, go to tinyurl.com/mysweetpaperemail to sign up. I always love hearing from you, so leave a comment on this video and let me know what you thought of these designs. Until next time, happy stamping.